Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skyler Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Shawn.
Welcome and welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast on a day when we are anxiously waiting to fire dem cannons, and the hat that you see on the logo every single week is the hat that they wear, and it is a hat of victory today. I am your Colonial champion, Shawn McCarty. We are reviewing Survivor Series 1997 because neither of us could be bothered with Crown Jewel, no matter how interesting it may or may not have been for a variety of reasons. But I say we, not just because I am a crazy man who talks to himself like he talks to other people, but because I am joined by the nefarious man of the hour, man with the power, the man too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area Brawler himself, Skyler Greenberg. How you doing, my man?
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Who's your daddy, Montreal?
Shawn Michaels sucks. He should die right now. Anyways.
But that's the 97 Shawn Michaels. And the 2005 Shawn Michaels. And the 2010 Shawn Michaels. But we have a pay-per-view that we chose for its historical significance. And historically speaking, Survivor Series 1997 is known for one thing. What would that one thing be, Sky?
Something about a job.
So it was a job, all right. And there was definitely screws that were in that building. Otherwise, it would have fallen apart. And it happened to be in Montreal. And all of those things lead us to one name that they don't even use in WWE anymore because they still can't come to terms with this night. The Montreal Screwjob.
I thought you were going to say Chris Benoit.
But no. That's something else that they also cannot come to terms with. But yeah, you want to jump down that rabbit hole, we'll be here for hours. But we're going to be talking plenty as it is. Overall, I wanted to see what the rest of this show was before it led up to this moment. Because I have not watched this pay-per-view in a very long time. So I wanted to see how it tracked. If it tracked, does it track? Sky, let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Does it track?
Yes and no.
In what ways?
We need to remember that this is 1997. This is 25 years ago. The anniversary of the Montreal Screwjob is this year. 25 years.
That's right.
Lots changed in wrestling. A lot of things have gotten better. A lot of things have gotten worse. A lot of things are different. The show itself doesn't age very well because WWF, even if they had something going on in the main event with main eventers, the undercard and midcard sucked unholy amounts of ass.
And it's not even because of the fault of the wrestlers, like we say all the time about modern wrestling, because they're all very capable. It's just the garbage gimmicks they're given and what they're interacting with in a gimmick show like this. And we're going to talk about the gimmick of Survivor Series a little bit towards the end, because I want to kind of overview this whole idea with Triple H now being the one to take things over. But this is the one that really created Vince.
Well, it didn't create Vince. It created Mr. McMahon.
Well, yes. But him as a major figure in the actual factoring in of the booking was pivotal to what the Attitude Era was going to become. But little did Vince know that it was going to happen on this night. And
little did he know that he was going to be the bad guy, despite thinking he was doing the right thing.
Well, and I think he genuinely thought he was going to be the babyface coming out of that thing, and people were not going to behave that way. And it's interesting to me, and we'll get to talking about this when we get to the incident itself, how the commentators proceeded with that match versus the rest of the show. But we've got a long way to go in the 2 hours and 45 minutes that this pay-per-view was. And a lot of that is elimination tags, and I, like probably you, I would imagine, and definitely Montreal, got burnt out with multi-man tags pretty quickly.
But which match did your eyes glaze over the rest of the show until the main event?
Well, I tried to watch everything as intensely as I can, and I feel like it was just the fact that we had 3 4-on-4s in a row. And really, you could tell immediately what was happening and why. It was just. Well, let's just dive into this, shall we? First of all, we start out with the show and they go, "Hello, I'm Jim Ross, and there's Jerry the King Lawler." They go to the Spanish commentators and they have no audio. Then they go to the French commentators and they get audio, but
remember, we're in Quebec, Montreal, Canada. The French get priority over the Spanish.
Well, and it was also a little bit of foreshadowing because they were going to have a hard time all night. And we start off with the new Blackjacks and the Headbangers, Barry Windham, JBL, Mosh, and Thrash, or Thrasher, versus the New Age Outlaws and the Godwins.
Ooh.
Your first impressions of this match?
Except for Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, the rest of this was just Vince McMahon. Okay, I'm going to give you a gimmick. I don't care how good or bad it is. You're going to use the gimmick.
I'll tell you this. I felt bad for these individuals because you could tell there was talent on both of these sides, but this is not the place that it was going to be adequately showcased. This is early. No, go ahead.
Talk about randomly thrown together tag teams. This was 4 tag teams thrown together for really no reason other than to just get them on the card.
Well, really the reason was to get the Outlaws over. That was really the only reason this was on the show. And about 2 minutes into the show, I said, well, the only team that's really they were really pushing here was the New Age Outlaws, and that is why they were the last 2 standing. But you know what was the worst was that fiddle entrance. That was just grating against the ears as Road Dogg was screaming out into the crowd.
Steers and queers.
Yeah. It was a different time, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of, when we get to the Shawn Michaels match, we are not allowed to say the word that was in the crowd, so we're not going to do it. Understood?
But we saw it.
But we saw it. And we'll talk about that later, but we're not allowed to say it. That's because of YouTube. That's because of YouTube. That's not on us. But in any case, did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
Who cares?
Yes, we did. It is 1 for 1, and I did make a count on this one just because I was curious for a Survivor Series match what it was going to be. Who did you think was the most impressive of the baby faces in this matchup?
Bradshaw.
Yeah, agreed. I really liked that abdominal stretch where he fell backwards into the pin. I'd never seen something like that before, but that was really creative.
It was. Here, let me ask you a more specific question.
Okay.
Who was the worst looking wrestler in this entire match of all 8 of them?
I don't want to say it was Barry, but it might have been Barry.
How old was he at this point?
Well, that's the thing, though. This was late stage Barry Windham. His body was shot. He was maybe a year away from retiring, if that. and that's not his fault, and he was doing it really to help JBL get over anyway. And anything that's going to be like the new of this is never the same. And the new Blackjacks, it wasn't going to work, but it did make JBL look good. The other guy who I thought stood out on that babyface team was Mosh. Really in that early part, he had talent. He was moving around. It was the gimmick of the Headbangers is strange, but I'm sure that there was something that they were prior to Vince taking some piece of their identity away from them that made them more coherent. But Mosh looked good. Thrash was okay. He was okay.
The Godwins were cringe every time they were in the ring.
Yeah, because Midian was, he was pretty late in his career too. Actually, both of them were, at that point. And then there was J.R. Lawler said, "I don't think these Canadians like Texas," as they were booing the Godwins and the Outlaws. And I'm not. And then the fans chanted something, and I'm not sure what it was, but it might have been that same word in question that we can't repeat.
To answer your question, yes, it was.
Yeah. Montreal in 97 was quite a fan of said word in question that we cannot use, and we will not unveil what it is.
Like I said, a lot of things aged poorly in 97 compared to 22. And especially, tell me when you were looking in the crowd. Did you see a lot of guys?
I wasn't looking at ratios. But
it felt like a lot of guys.
It was kind of a crap crowd all night. It actually ended up making it kind of confusing, but it really, in the defense of Montreal, it's not like Vince's booking was doing them any exciting favors. Vince basically laid a Skylar Greenberg to LA Laird turd onto the city of Montreal on this night.
With the exception of one match.
With the exception of one match. And this is also timely considering that they're now going back to Montreal for a pay-per-view or a premium live event, as it were. But this, I really don't have... There was a nice bulldog counter into a pin that was good in this match. But then they started going in, Thrash and Pig, Phineas Godwin, started getting people worked up, but then they started chain wrestling and it ground back to a halt. And it really did kind of indict the state of the 1997 tag division too. Because the New Age Outlaws, like you said, Sky, were basically the only ones of any worth going in for the next several years.
It depended on who was around. The one thing that WWF did during this time is that they stuck almost everybody in a stable, so they had something to do.
Yeah. Yeah, as evidenced by the...
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, as evidenced by the match that we're gonna get right after this, but
yeah, it's just their idea was stick everybody in the stable, and if anybody stands out, we'll make them either a single star or a tag team star, and it's a way to build a tag team division. It's an interesting way to build a tag team division.
Yeah, and it I don't know if it necessarily worked. And there would be more that would be coming along in the next couple of years that obviously would fill in the ranks, as it were. But it was not at this point, and I think that that's what the big takeaway from this whole show is like, this is really right before WWE shows really started to improve. And you could see why WCW was kicking the holy hell out of WWE in 97 with a show like this.
Right. You'd have to watch WCW in context in order to get that kind of idea. But especially because they hadn't found their stride yet. Like, again, this was the birth of the Mr. McMahon character. Going forward, that will be a very good thing. But really, the show was lacking energy.
Yeah. And the crowd was really just not having it. They were in bursts for this matchup, but not really majorly into this matchup. And when the Outlaws won, you know, heels got a lot of wins on this on this night. And the Outlaws won, and the fans booed, but the Outlaws were the only ones that they really cared about. So the match was okay, I guess, but it wasn't really anything special. Just kind of served its purpose.
Pretty much.
And then, if you wanted to take the purpose out of a 4-on-4, we get this match. It is Don Callis and the Truth Commission versus DOA, the Disciples of Apocalypse, which is Crush, the Harris Twins, and fourth person.
Are you sure that wasn't Dead on Arrival?
Well, the thing... I feel bad for Crush because he's a guy who always had talent, but after his thing with with Demolition, they just never found... You know, they then showed him in the colors of the soft drink, and then he just never recovered from that, and they never gave him a workable gimmick, including being this biker in the Disciples of Apocalypse. Like, that was not going to work. And the Harris Twins, the less said about those two, the better.
Yeah, the Harris Twins were bad, and Chains, a.k.a. fake Mr. Undertaker.
Yeah, and that, he did the best he could, I guess.
Which, by the way, during the entrance of the Truth Commission, there was a sign that said, Undertaker is not a homo.
Yeah. Which, okay. Glad we cleared that up.
Me about this entire match.
Yeah. Well, Kurgan is hilarious. And this was Bikers before, as you mentioned before. This is the biker gimmick before Taker actually got it over.
Yeah. Again, this is the whole thing of Vince McMahon's booking. I'm going to create different stables with different reasonings for existing, and they're going to go up against each other in gang warfare.
Yeah.
This is bikers against South African militants.
Yeah, I don't even know what the hell this whole Truth Commission deal is, because, like, they go in, I forget what the names of these guys, Recon, Sniper, and the Interrogator, and then the Jackal, which is Don Callis. And yeah, Callis on commentary sounds just as douchey in '97 as he does now.
But at least there was a purpose back then.
Well, the purpose is to 69 Kenny now. There is still a purpose, it's just not something we're interested in. I mean, oh, well, to be fair, I wasn't interested in this either, but I might be more interested in this than I would be in 69 Kenny Omega. Just saying.
The Truth Commission feels like a watered-down version of the Nation of Domination.
You know, well, kinda, but you could tell all three of the guys on this were green, and the Disciples of Apocalypse were not good enough to make this valuable of a matchup. You know, and Callis just gets on commentary and talks the way that he always does. I like his look better bald than I do with hair. So...
Yeah.
Wasn't
that... Now, hold on. Can we go back to the Harris Twins for a second?
Do we have to?
Weren't they legendarily one of the tag teams that Jim Cornette said, you are the worst tag team I've ever seen in my entire life, and neither of you should be in wrestling?
No, I don't know if it's that one or the, there was one that was in OVW that was notoriously bad.
But weren't they in OVW?
The Harris Twins? No, I don't believe so. They were in Smoky Mountain, but I don't think they were in...
No, you're right. There's a different tag team.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really bad tag teams in WWF in the late 90s.
Yeah, there were. There were, but, you know, Crush looked good. Brian looked good. You know, he had a really nice triangle head scissors at one point on one of these guys. But this really wasn't meant to do much of anything. Did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
Who cares?
No, we did not. It is one of two. And Kurgan just gets the sidewalk slam on a couple of these guys and just beats them. And I understand why they do that, and I wouldn't mind the sidewalk slam as a finish if Kurgan looked like he actually landed it decently once.
but he's 7'3", 380 pounds.
Yes. Thank you, Omos. Some things never change, folks.
There's a lot of things that I just realized when I'm watching these shows. I'm like, Vince McMahon has recycled a lot of really bad gimmicks.
Yes, he has. He's like, I will get this through, damn it. I don't care.
Let's be honest. Besides the Big Show, is there any actual talented giants in wrestling in the last 25 years?
Not that well. John Reese was good as he was, I think, the Wall, and he was decent in WCW. That was, I guess, now close to. No, that was 25 years ago. He was pretty good, but then his body kind of gave up on him.
Abyss. Braun Strowman.
Briefly.
For like 8 months.
Yeah. That was more of a flash in the pan than I think it was a legitimate thing. But I think that, probably Abyss. That's probably the only one.
So besides Big Show and Abyss, every other giant they tried to get over has been shit because Great Khali, Kurgan, Omos.
Kurgan did better acting in things like the Sherlock Holmes movies. He ended up having like a much better acting career anyway. So it's like. But man, and as for the crowd, I thought they didn't give a shit about the last match. Oh man. The amount of shits these people could not give. Oi.
What were you supposed to give with this match and the people involved in this match?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But again, this is kind of like quality over quantity when it comes to these gimmick matches. If you're not going to put quality ones on the show, don't put them on the show.
But they had to fill time.
Well, and we had another one. But this one had to do with backwards patriotism. It is
Wait, we're not even going to talk about the finish?
It's another sidewalk slam. And then Don Callis, and then some lady shrieks, and then that's the end of the game. And the match, and they win. And is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
No. Now that you mention it, no.
Alrighty then. And that's the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. And now we are on to backwards patriotism. It is the baby faces who are talked about like heels and gave promos like heels in Team USA, which is Goldust, Vader, Mark Merrow, and Sable, and the debuting Steve Blackman versus Team Canada of Doug Furnace, Phil LaFawn, the British Bulldog, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And that was well, what did you think about this match?
At least this was the best of the 4-on-4 so far. And people actually gave a damn about this match.
Well, they did their best to make them not, though. They really did. And this is where the dynamic of this match got very, very confusing. Because they did this promo with Michael Cole. Nobody told Michael Cole to move out of the way so people could read Goldust's head. And Vader cuts a promo about nobody messing with the United States that was obviously not going to get cheered. Blackman has the personality of my fucking vacuum cleaner that's got hair stuck in it, so it doesn't even suck properly. Mark Merrow, boy, how the mighty have fallen from being one of the best features of the mid-card in WCW is Johnny B. Bad to being Sable's bitch. And I liked, and the guy who I really liked in this, what did you think of these promos? Because I thought that Doug Furnace's promo was quite good. I mean, for what they're talking about. I mean, patriotism never hits as well as it used to, but like at the very least, he's trying to make the best of that.
I know you said that Steve Blackman didn't have any charisma, but Doug Furnace to me felt like a charisma vacuum.
At least he was allowed to look into the camera, directly into the camera, and look at you as he talked, which I respect better than them trying to like dart their eyes around the camera, which is more reason I didn't hate it. I honestly didn't hate the promo. I felt like you could actually believe he meant that, you know, and you know, obviously, well, I don't know whether he does or doesn't, but it doesn't matter because they came out. I like the fact that JR was like, yeah, well, really only LaFon is Canadian. All the rest of these people are like sympathizers.
Well, they married into Canadian families.
Yeah. So, but then.
But hold on. We've skipped over something very important.
Your general manager's music?
Call him Kurt Angle. Call Kurt Angle. Yes. Team USA came out the Kurt Angle's theme.
Yes. And this was after the Patriot used it, Del Wilkes. And that was against Bret when Bret was champion in 97. And
imagine if they did the thing where they would use a theme song for one person and then never use it again.
Yeah.
Imagine Kurt Angle not having this theme.
I know. Right? I can't even fathom like what Kurt would have been without this music. And speaking of, the pop would not be the same. And speaking of pops, you know what the best one of the baby faces? Sable.
Wait, which baby face?
Sable. Well, yes, good question. Which baby face? Because there weren't any on the USA side, and there weren't really any on the Canadian side either.
They really should have leaned into the Canadians being baby faces on this show, and anyone who was wrestling against a Canadian was a heel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those ones where they really tried to fight it, and they insisted. But, like, you didn't want to, like, the Americans, because Goldust didn't care, and, you know, they said all that inflammatory shit, but at the same time, like, all of the Canadians cheated in one version or another, so, like, you can't even cheer, like, for your quote-unquote hometown boys. And the crowd reflected it as such. I think they were more confused at the end than anything else.
No, the crowd cheered for the Canadians when they were cheating.
Kind of.
Again, this is the whole thing of the fans that were in Montreal that night. I don't know, they just didn't react the way that we expected them to, but they were going to root for the Canadians no matter what, even if they were cheating bastards.
Yeah, it still felt weird because I still think that the pops could have been better if they had just chosen one way or another. Instead of doing that, like the whole, saying, well, I guess any means necessary. But I have to say, seeing Sable there, boy, you could see the similarities between her and Scarlett. You can. I mean, just the way that people gravitate towards her and want to look at her. Like,
okay, but here's my question. Did you have the same feelings when you were watching Sable that you do with Scarlett?
I think Scarlett is hotter than Sable.
Okay, but do you have those same feelings towards Sable? Is Sable attractive?
Well, it's difficult because knowing that Sable really just wanted to be famous and didn't really care about the wrestling business at all, it's hard for me to find that attractive as a wrestling fan, where I do believe that Scarlett actually cares about the business. So I think that also factors into it. I mean, is Sable still attractive? Yes. You could see why people were lusting over her in the 90s. But because Brock Lesnar is on ACPW programming, and I tend not to want to piss him off enough for him to leave my show, I'm not going to speak any more about Sable's attractiveness one way or another.
Plus, Sable is also 55, so at this point, she's an old hag.
Well, all right. Yeah, y'all done burning breaches. I don't, you don't care about.
Those are my words, not Shawn. Shawn had nothing to do with that.
That's right. It's and then, Sky.
Continue, though,
what?
This is the match where WWF started to play around with the rules really stupidly.
Yeah.
There's no way that Steve Blackman got counted out that quickly.
Yeah, and also, if you're going to have him do a bunch of stuff, and then have him not know what the rules are for wrestling. Get the fuck out of here. That's so stupid. And this was the first of, and I kid you not, folks, four, actually, it's not the first, this was the third of 4 countouts in the course of the night because of all these eliminations, and they couldn't come up with anything else clever.
But this was the most egregious one because this is one where they're clearly trying to protect Steve Blackman while still making him look cool.
Yeah.
But they just made him look like an idiot. But at the same time, the referee's 10 count was so quick, I didn't even register it. It didn't register.
Yeah, it literally was like when you just mash the X button as a special referee in the video game. It is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, sorry, Steve. Sucks to suck. Come back when you're wearing black pants. And
by the way, you are incorrect. This was the first of 3 countouts.
I'm pretty sure there were 4 total over the night, right? Wasn't there at least for the, or maybe I'm thinking of a disqualification then.
You may be thinking of a disqualification or something else. I don't know. Again, the rules were starting to be really ignored, and this was annoying because, like, I understand that WWF plays around with the rules more than any other wrestling company, but have some sort of consistency so that when you do break the rules, it's for an advantage to get heat or something. I don't know. It's just, I want more consistency from WWF.
Yeah, and this wasn't the time you were going to get it. And I will say this with Team Canada, they shouldn't have come out to Bret's theme either. I feel save that for the main event. You know,
well, they had to represent that they were Canadian.
I know, but I think they could have done that a different way, personally. But it's also interesting to think that this was also half of the heels' last night was on this night. Little did we know that. And I did forget to mention Jerry Lawler. I mentioned that JR mentioned that only one of them was from Canada. And the line after that from Jerry Lawler was, "Don't get the facts get in the way of a good story, JR." I was like, that's like just enough level of fourth wall breaking for me to be like, okay, that's good. That's only a heel like Jerry Lawler could get away with saying that and not have it be like, what the fuck are you doing?
I know.
Did we get a collar double tie-up in this match?
Yes, maybe.
We did, but not to start the match, so I didn't give it to them because they first, they kind of just started going after each other to begin with. But once Vader got in, this match started getting halfway decent. And Vader gave Anvil and Bulldog a lot of offense. And then he killed everybody.
Well, this was a time for Vader to not necessarily... He was going to be on the way out, and he knew it too.
Yeah, and that's another one that's like, what a shame that is, because if a couple things had gone differently, if that match with Shawn Michaels had gone differently, Vader could have drawn good money for WWE, I think, at this point, even though he may have looked or felt like a bygone or a Bond-going era, but there could have been a spot for Vader there if they had just figured out what to do with him.
Yeah, but Vader had also always been better in Japan than he was in America.
Oh, well, I can't necessarily dispute that. That's also because they made Vader. But
yeah, but again, it's one of those things where Vince McMahon hears about something overseas or over in another company, he takes it, doesn't know what got it over in the first place, screws it up, has it get squashed by one of his creations, and then moves on.
Yeah. Sadly. Well, and also Shawn Michaels being Shawn Michaels, but we'll get to that later.
It's all rinse and repeat.
But I do have to say, JR did a good job of, also painting the Americans as, reading the room and knowing, okay, this is, a mostly pro-Canada crowd. So I'm going to do a little bit more on commentary to talk about how, maybe this American team isn't as, high and mighty as we all think they are. And, he tried to, paint the picture the way that the room was reading rather than the way that Vince probably wanted it to go. But I think it was the right move. I just wish that, the booking itself had actually accommodated for that.
True, especially because the whole thing of this match and the real storyline was Goldust not tagging in.
Right, and not caring. Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, it just was really difficult too, because then it made like Doug Furnace's low blow very confusing, who to cheer for. And then, but then there was that Doug Furnace belly to belly on Vader. Oh, that was beautiful. And props to Vader for bumping for all these guys.
Yeah, but I think he also felt like he didn't really have much say.
Well, maybe. But then there's another count out. And this was just... And then they finally finished this match, and it's just... The whole... They did the thing with the ring bell with Bulldog to knock out... I forget who was left, because obviously...
Vader.
Right, Vader was left because Goldie just walked out, and that was another count out. Yo, that's right. There were 2 in this match, so there were 4 count outs.
Right, but this was the egregious one again, because the first one was a quick count. The second one was Goldust walking out. Doug Furnace gets eliminated by Vader, but then interferes with him with the low blow, gives Bulldog time to grab a bell, hit him in the head with it while the referee's distracted with Furnace.
Yeah.
But because Bulldog is married to the Harts, he gets cheered in Canada.
Yeah, but it was like, oh, okay, heels win. I mean, the bell, that was kind of cheating, but Canada, yay. It was definitely a diminished return than what it could have been if they had actually just kind of audibled their way to just making the Canadians babyface for that one night. But in any event, it was what it was. I think that just the dynamic of it just made the pop suffer, and with the talent involved, that is kind of a shame.
It is a shame.
But thankfully we have a blimp in the arena to soothe our woes.
So late 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of late 90s, how about the phone call that they made that was wicked awkward and is definitely a plant, just to talk about Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Yes, there was that one. There was also the Super Supper Sweet Six winner, Jacqueline Cook.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That phone call.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you that was a plant. Because the second is like, who are you going to pick? Stone Cold! And Jerry's like, wait a minute. And he had all that stuff ready with his necktie. I don't know. Gabagool. I don't know.
Yeah. And Jacqueline, by the way, is... You know who Jacqueline is anyways.
Well, I know Jackie Moore.
Yeah.
So... Then we move into the mid-card portion of this matchup. You know, honestly, this Survivor Series 97 felt like an episode of Palmetto Power. Because we just got through all the low-card matches. Now we're going to go to a commercial. Now we're going to do the mid-card matches. And then we're going to have 2 more matches. Then we're going to have another commercial. Then we're going to do the 2 upper-card matches.
Josh, again, is not going to approve that.
No, he sure ain't. You're welcome. Tune in to Palmetto Power whenever we do that again. Well, it's Kane versus Mankind. That's on the road to getting Kane over to wrestle Undertaker at WrestleMania.
And the never-ending stuff with Kane and Undertaker.
Yep. And this match, there really wasn't a whole lot to it. But there were some interesting things that were in this. First of all, I love Mick Foley. He is so goddamn good. Everything he does just makes me smile.
Although nowadays, whenever I see him do the ridiculous bumps, I cringe.
Yeah.
The promo he cuts as Mankind before this match is really cool. And also just creepy as shit.
He was so good. And that's what I mean. He was so good at that. And like the way that, the cadence needed to be, to get all of that. And you believed and felt all of it. And then did you notice in the crowd, speaking of, the South Park 316 sign?
Yes, but tell the people what it said.
It said South Park 316, but that's the craziest part. That South Park was released and started in 1997. That was the year that South Park came out.
I tell you, man, South Park was an instant hit.
So that was a season 1 fan right there. That's pretty it's pretty wild. Did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
No, of course we didn't.
No, but this had a good reason. Obviously.
Well, you want to know what we did get?
We got Bray Wyatt lighting.
Yep.
We got Fiend lighting. Actually, no, I take that back. We got Kane lighting that Bray Wyatt took.
Yep, which is also kind of damning on WWE that now I'm just like, oh, so the Fiend gimmick isn't original.
However,
so it's clearly a take on Mankind's Mick Foley combined with the Kane lighting.
However, I will say this. It was better here because it was toned down a little bit. You could actually see faces with this one. You could not see that with the Fiend. That was so bright a red that nobody could see anything. You could at least see what everyone was doing in this matchup.
Even though, it made the match worse and you couldn't really see what was happening.
Well, compared to the lights just being up. But it's Foley doing, Foley took the thigh under the steel steps, which was always brutal.
And then the table bump.
And tables just broke better back then. I don't know what it is. But
because they made them too prop gimmicky now.
Yeah, and then they're like, Tito Santana's hurt. They never cut to him being hurt, but they're like, Tito's hurt. Yeah, Tito's hurt. Poor Tito. Nobody cared. And then they do
because if it was a French Canadian, then they would have cared.
Yeah. But then they do the DDT on the concrete, which I think is a hospitalization angle, really. When you think about the way that Jake Roberts had one DDT in the middle of the ring and that would put somebody out. I know that DDT was starting to become less effective at this point.
Everything was becoming less effective.
Yeah. But then we got Kane doing the Lesnar jump, which was pretty dope.
Kane was pretty athletic at this time.
Yeah, except Kane, as he was going for the finish here with the tombstone, had to take 3 or 4 steps back to rebalance himself before he did it. So it was a near disastrous tombstone, but he did it nonetheless.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was the best thing we had seen all night, but the rules were definitely lax. Because there was a lot of weapon usage and throwing people around, and there was no countouts or any of that shit.
Yeah, again, the refereeing was starting to go down with the previous match, and it will continue to go down with the next few matches.
Yeah, this is where the officiating was starting to be less important for WWE, and that was kind of inflictive of the Attitude Era. Is there anything else you want to add to this? Kane getting the win as he should, to continue what's going on. Mankind, he'll be just fine.
Assuming that he hasn't got a tooth going through his nose.
Right, well that's coming, that's next year. We ain't ready for that yet.
But Shawn, I have a question for you.
I have an answer for you.
A lot of this show has grounded me down, and just remembering it has grounded me down. And I need something to pick me up. I need something to listen to get me back in the mood to continue this review, because I don't know if I'm ready. Do you have something that can help me?
Well, folks, I might, Sky. I just might. But I'm going to have to send you a link. And that link is in the description of this video, which you should be liking and subscribing and sharing with all of your friends and switching that bell button to all, so that every time we post, you will get to know about it. And on top of that, you should take a look in that description, because in there you will find the discography of AB Productions CT. That's right, folks. 2 industry-busting artists who are taking the world slowly by storm. And it has been 2 albums here in the late season of autumn that are going to rock the world, the music world, to its core. Just a Bit More was released, of course, on October 14th. And that is already on Spotify and Apple Music. And, of course, there's plenty of SoundCloud hype tracks to lead us up to that as well. And now We are also looking forward to Mixed Bag 2, Abizzle's album that's coming out November 18th. So stay tuned for that a couple Fridays from now. And that is going to be a hell of an album. I am very excited for that one to come out. It's all over the place with that one, but it is the sequel, a storyline sequential sequel to my debut album 4 years ago called Mixed Bag. Mixed Bag 2 coming out November 18th. And we have a ton of other projects between Bear Min and Mixed Bag and Just a Bit More and Recovering and Rest Stop and Retreat and Wax Apocalypse. And that's not even counting all the SoundCloud stuff we've got. There's 2 names to look forward to going forward in the music industry. 2 names that are changing the way that people look at music and the way that people describe genres, because we blend, we mend, we meld, and we yell from the top of our lungs that there is new change coming. In the new era, and entertainment has arrived. Look for White Knux, spelled W-H-I-T-E space K-N-U-X, or Abizzle, spelled A-B-I-Z-Z-L-E on SoundCloud, Apple Music, or Spotify. Anywhere you want to find your music, you will find us somewhere. Come join the entertainment revolution of AB Production CT. And if only WWE had a sponsor like us, maybe they would have the soundtrack of the ages going forward in this new era of WWE in 2022. But we're still awaiting the phone call on Triple H. Our demands are still our demands from last week. We're still waiting to hear from you.
Only you can make the show better, Triple H.
That's right.
You know who to call.
Yeah, and you were on this show. And speaking of, we get this backstage moment where they ask Vince McMahon, who's going to win? And Vince looks in with this knowing smirk. He goes, I don't know.
Shh. Like hell you do.
Yeah, because I have to imagine at this point the decision had already been made.
Yep. Also, Sergeant Slaughter for like 2 seconds.
Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter for 2 seconds, and nobody cared for 2 seconds.
Also, what's the whole thing about send your cable bill to Survivor Series?
Dude, yeah, what the no. Yeah, what? Why people? No. I was also very confused about that. That is something that does not sound like something I would want to engage in.
Well, I mean, maybe you would be getting something if you sent a picture of a boober and sent to Vince McMahon or something.
Yeah, but here's my cable bill with all my personal information and my credit card number and my social security. Here you go.
Again, a lot of the things that we saw on this show was late 90s stuff. Like, you were going to see stuff that you would not see today.
Yeah, sure was. But the one thing that we were going to get, because we had one more of them, and the 4th on the show was another elimination tag. Oh, goddamn.
It's too bad, because this was the best of the 4.
It was, but at this point I was so burnt out from 4-man tags that I'm like, oh, I didn't even want to see this, and I liked all the people involved.
Except for Ahmed.
It's the Nation of Domination. It is The Rock, Farouk, D'Lo Brown, and Kama, also known as the Godfather, also known as Charles Wright, versus Ken Shamrock, the Legion of Doom, also known as the Road Warriors, and Ahmed Johnson.
Ooh.
Well, what did you think of this match?
Again, this was the best of the 4-on-4, and even at this time, you could tell that The Rock was starting to get over.
Dude, the Rock was the only thing over in this match.
Well, Ken Shamrock was kind of over.
Okay, fair enough. Ken Shamrock was kind of over, but not the way that Rocky was over as far as people despising him.
That's true.
And really, this match only was good because they left the final 4 or 5 minutes to be just Ken Shamrock and The Rock.
I feel bad for Farouk, though. Because he should be bigger than he was.
Well,
I mean, we're talking about Ron Simmons, but...
The thing is, with Ron, it's like... Yes, again, kind of I feel like the same way that Vader would have felt like a wrestler from a bygone era or a going-by era. I don't know if you could necessarily make Ron Simmons the guy for leading your company through that, so much of that anti-establishment level vibe that the 90s were going to bring. And
no, but you could have done more than just have him be the guy to get usurped by The Rock and then almost do nothing. I mean, granted, his tag team with Bret was pretty funny.
Well, I mean, APA was a very serious thing. I mean, in '99, you know, they didn't really become the beer drinking guys until 2000. You know, up until then, they were just the acolytes on, you know, with the Undertaker and the Ministry, and then the corporate ministry and all that jazz. And you know, I do have to say, we were talking about Ken Shamrock, and you said Ken Shamrock was kind of over. I do got to give big ups to Ken Shamrock for getting as over as he did in 97, 98, 2000, or, you know, WWF. Because it would have been really easy for him not to, given what his background was and the whole UFC getting off the ground, even though at that time the UFC had a lot of similar traits to WWE, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, true, but the reason why he got over was because he had national television exposure, especially with that documentary about being the most dangerous man in the world. And that's what got him over, is that he was a legit badass.
Right.
He was one of the guys, along with Dan Severn and a couple of others, that brought legitimacy to WWF at a time when it could really use it.
Yeah, oh, no doubt. Yeah, and they tried to do that with Mark Henry, and I feel like they would later, but Mark Henry turned into something kind of completely different. But that was what bringing people like Ken Shamrock and Mark Henry in was there for. God, every time I see the Road Warriors, they make me smile. I love that tag team. They're so good.
Plus, they were the WWF Tag Team Champions at the time.
Yes, they were. And did we get a honorable tie-up in this matchup?
We did.
We did. However, there's one... What? I have a grievance.
What's that grievance?
So, I forget which one of the four it was. I want to say it might have been D'Lo. D'Lo picks up Hawk and hits him with a pile driver. And D'Lo turns around and Hawk just gets right back up. And I know it's the Road Warriors, but fuck you for selling a pile driver. If you weren't fucking Hawk, I would have been fucking furious.
Wait, did Hawk do a pile driver?
No,
Wait,
Hawk took a pile driver and no-sold it like fuck. And he just got right back up and then hit the shit out of... actually, I think he probably shit-canned D'Lo out of the ring. But yes, that they hit him with a pile driver that he just literally got right back up from. And I'm like, oh, fuck you.
And then he hit a reverse stunner to D'Lo, who tagged in The Rock immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, I was so pissed. If I were D'Lo, or if I were doing a pile driver later when the whole theme of Austin and Owen was the pile driver, why would you have a no-sold pile driver in the match before? Fuck you, I'm not letting you no-sell a pile driver.
But here's the thing, is that immediately a minute after, he gets hit by the rock bottom and gets pinned.
I know! That's the most ridiculous thing. It's like, but still, fuck you, I'm not letting you not sell my pile driver. If I'm doing one, you're gonna take that motherfucker. I don't care. I know it's the Road Warriors. And that's the thing. It's the Road Warriors. They know sold shit all the time. That was their whole deal. I understand that, but like, but still, I was offended. I was like unnecessarily offended. But in any case.
Speaking of offended, what the hell is up with Ahmed Johnson's ring gear?
That was always his look. But, you know, speaking of Ahmed Johnson, at this point, the damage had already been done to him injury-wise. Like, he had lost the confidence of the booking. And I think a lot of that was because they were trying to give him some major pushes in 95 and 96. And every time they did, he was out for an extended amount of time. And it was really shown here that this was not a... You know, he did a few things, but at the same time, it was not what Ahmed Johnson was a couple years earlier.
Clearly not. I mean, he got rid of Farouk, and then the way that they got rid of Ahmed Johnson was just ass.
Yeah. And Ron barely got that backbreaker on Ahmed Johnson as well.
Meat's ready.
But, you know, and the whole thing of Farouk going first was an angle in and of itself. You know, and then, of course, but Rocky was just getting yelled. And then we saw what I can only describe as Ahmed Johnson skipping, and that was supposed to be his Hulk up? And the crowd went, okay.
What was Ahmed Johnson's gimmick?
Pearl River.
Is that really it?
Plunge. Ahmed Johnson. That's about it.
Was he supposed to be like a metrosexual man?
I'm not even really sure. But then, like, that whole thing about, like, them holding the feet. But the second ref, like, looked right at them when they did that. So wouldn't the second ref tell the first ref to just... You know what? Never mind. 97.
Oh, yeah, and that's another thing, too. We forgot, is that this is a time when they had two refs watching each and every Survivor Series match. So how do you miss stuff?
No, he was looking right goddamn at it. And the referee was like, well, he was holding his feet, but, you know, you already counted him out. So I guess we'll just have to go with it. So I don't know what the fuck.
That's the thing, is that you have two referees in this match and they still screwed up.
Yeah. And then we hear a whole mess of feedback. And JR was like, what was that? And Lawler was like, oh, that's our perfidious man in the back in charge of audio, Kevin Dunn. And I'm like, yes, public shame for Kevin Dunn. It really is Survivor Series 1997. Public shame for Kevin Dunn. I love it.
I wish we could do it more.
We do it enough as it is.
I wish they would do it more.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. And
including getting him fired.
And yeah, that'd be the best. That would be the best. But I will say this. Literally, Rocky's just sitting there on the ring apron and everyone's going, Rocky sucks. They're not giving a fucking damn about anyone wrestling in the ring if it's not The Rock. And then D'Lo does a leg drop that he is also using as a cover. And I didn't know how I felt about that.
D'Lo's the best?
And I like D'Lo a lot. But that leg drop that was a pin, I mean, even JR and Kane were like, okay, that wasn't really a cover. And it should not have been used as a cover. But
another thing, too, is that a lot of people, when they were being covered, didn't have their shoulders on the mat.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. And then Animal gets counted out. And at this point, I wrote down in my notes, Vince did to Montreal what I did to Tampa and what Sky did to LA. 4 countouts. And it's the truth.
It's the truth, Commission.
And then D'Lo taps to the ankle lock, right? Because they do finally, Ken Shamrock gets thing. And then suddenly Tim White looks over at D'Lo and now suddenly just cares about him when he's been focused on the in-ring participants the whole match, which is why they have 2 referees there to begin with. But all of a sudden he cares more about D'Lo Brown so they could do another fuck finish with The Rock. Well, why would Tim White just suddenly not care about the participants to check on D'Lo so then The Rock can go in and hit Shamrock with the chair?
He was just amazed by D'Lo's traps.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it was definitely just man-ogling. But once this got into The Rock and Ken Shamrock, this is when the match really picked up.
The Rock and Ken Shamrock had a lot of chemistry that was really underrated.
Yeah, and surprising for the level of talent that both of them had and their level of experience in big-time matches and big-level situations.
It's one of those interesting things where it would have been interesting if instead of joining the ministry, if Ken Shamrock had been, the corporation, if Ken Shamrock had gone up against The Rock, maybe at Mania?
Yeah.
But then that would have stopped the first Stone Cold Rock match, and that was the money match.
Yeah. I'm still interested in what would have happened if they had at any point put the belt on Ken Shamrock. Because I feel like they could have at a few points and chose not to. And, you know, in the end, it ended up working out. But in that situation, like, was there a time when Ken could have gotten the belt?
Well, the thing is that they gave him the Intercontinental title and had him carry it for a long time.
And did a great job with it. His matches with The Rock thereafter for the Intercontinental belt are great. In 98.
And the King of the Ring.
Yeah.
And then it's just one of those things where he was around too long because after the corporation and the union, he started... Do we need to talk about that storyline involving him and his sister, I think?
Yeah, I'd rather not. But, you know, that's...
WWF. If you're not gonna ruin yourself, we're gonna ruin you with shitty gimmicks.
At some point. It may be a long time coming, but at some point. But anyway...
Russo has to get his Jerry Springer shit in.
But finally, we do get a win, and it is Ken Shamrock finally getting the victory here, and it was a good finish, and it was the best Survivor Series match at this point. However, now that we are at the end of the elimination tags, I want to talk to you about this gimmick, because we're about to see Triple H do this gimmick of 5-on-5s or 4-on-4s or whatever the fuck. Do you what's the best way to frame this show with this gimmick in mind? Is it this way where you do 4 matches of them, or what way would you do this to better utilize this concept?
The thing about this match, this show in general with the 4-on-4s, is that they were trying to get people on the card. Of the 4 matches, only 2 of them really kind of deserve to be on the card, but you wanted to get the New Age Outlaws on the show, and the Truth Commission for some reason.
Right.
That's why they got matches like Team Canada versus Team USA. Okay, it's the patriotism gimmick in reverse, but you had to have that match on the show.
Yep.
And you needed this match with the Nation of Domination versus Ken Shamrock, the LOD, and Ahmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep it to 2 or 3, because once you even 3 is a little bit much. Just 2.
Yeah. See, to me, this 5-on-5 thing, I would save this to be like, I would frame the whole show around 1 match. 1 5-on-5. And that 5-on-5 would have the top talent in it, or close enough to the top talent in it, but they would all have a reason to be fighting each other, and there would be something of importance, not necessarily on the line, but why these individuals would be facing each other. But you build to this, and you don't necessarily hold this pay-per-view at the same time every year. And the thing is, because my thing is, I understand why this pay-per-view and this concept is meant to be for Thanksgiving. Well, actually, it was meant to be for Thanksgiving to choke out Crockett, so that's really the only reason why this is in November. I understand it's so long of a tradition.
You have to remember why Survivor Series was made, and it was specifically to go up against Jim Crockett Promotions and make sure that anything that was going on with them, I think it was specifically Clash of Champions.
Starrcade 86.
Or was it Super Brawl? It was one of those shows.
It was Starrcade 86. It was before it was in December. They had it on Thanksgiving. That was when the first few Starrcades were out. It was right around that time. And Vince basically said, you're either running Survivor, said to the pay-per-view buyers, you're either running Survivor Series or you're not getting WrestleMania, which was a very lucrative prospect and for pay-per-views. So they basically shut Crockett out of Starrcade, and then they were forced to use other means, but that was part of Vince's strategy, to take the competition and cut him off at the knees.
I got cut out for a couple seconds because Kevin Dunn hated that we talked about him.
Well, he deserves it. I was just talking about how they got cut off at the knees, did Crockett, because it was, but in any case, at this point, I don't think that Survivor Series necessarily, or the 5-on-5, I don't think necessarily what I would do is I would call the matchup itself the Survivor Series. You don't necessarily have to call the pay-per-view itself the Survivor Series anymore. And I understand it's one of the big four, but if they're going to dissolve Money in the Bank, you might as well do this for the other gimmick that doesn't really work anymore and has gone stale. The only one that really has maintained its longevity is the Rumble. And you have to rehab Hell in a Cell. Elimination Chamber maybe is fine.
If you take the name away, same thing with Money in the Bank. If you take the pay-per-view show name away, but you keep the match gimmick, you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind even Elimination Chamber not being a pay-per-view anymore and it just being a one match. I'm just saying that, like, the 5-on-5, one of the best 5-on-5s that I ever saw in the history of Survivor Series was 2001, just because it felt there was so much on the line, because it was the whole enchilada, who's gonna own WWE, and that was the big, all the prize and all the money and all the build led to that. As much of a fumbled mess as the invasion was, that was one of the the biggest hyped Survivor Series matches that had the biggest stakes. I'd like to have these tag matches have stakes again, and not just be obligatory, because it did, like you said, it felt like Vince, by obligation, had to put these guys on the fucking card. And I would rather it have just been, if anything, I would have rather have had, like, the Nation of Domination face Team Canada and have a proper heel team.
Heel versus heel, which is very weird.
Well, then you recognize the rule, read the room, know that they're going to cheer for Team Canada in Montreal, and you just have a heel versus what would be baby faces at that time. I know that would fuck with what Vince is trying to do. And that's what also makes it kind of difficult in the entire circumstance of what was going on. But it's just hard to say, like, what the best call is for this. But I was definitely burnt out of the gimmick, and I'd rather see the gimmick be special than the gimmick be obligatory.
Right, and this year they're trying to do War Games with it, which I don't know how that's going to go. The biggest thing is that if you're going to do the Survivor Series match, you need to have important people fighting each other for a reason other than bragging rights.
Right, and that is difficult to do nowadays.
Like, realistically, if you were to do Survivor Series in 2022, who would you have go up against each other?
God, I have to do some thought about that.
The obvious one is that you need the Bloodline to be involved, because if you have Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, the Usos, and Sami Zayn...
Yeah, but how many, you're going to get 6 people into a War Game? You're going to get 12 people into a War Games?
No, well, those 5.
Okay, so 10. A 10-person War Games? Damn.
But then that's the thing, is that who do you have go up against them? Because what babyface stable, or even any stable at this point, is able to go up against those 5 and credibly have a chance?
See, I feel like it would have to be some level of mishmashing. You'd have to have some previous opponents, leading the charge.
Would you have, like, the previous people that went up against Roman Reigns team together? Like, throw Edge, Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre. I don't know who else is going up against Roman. Now I have to think about that.
Brock Lesnar.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
He'd come in last. He'd be last.
Nah, I feel like they would have Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar continue their feud.
Yeah. Well, in any case, the match was what it was for the last one there, but we had 2 more matches of relative importance here, and this was another interesting one, because it's the rapidly popular Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship, and the first thing I wrote down was Steve Austin got a pop, but it is not what his pop would be in a year's time.
And because of who he was wrestling.
Well, yeah, because the people were still going to cheer for Owen, regardless. And Montreal really was kind of fucking with Vince's heel babyface dynamic, so I do kind of feel for that in this situation. But
yeah, but they also had a thing here where they had Stone Cold Steve Austin just shit on Team Canada.
Yeah. And did we get a Colonial tie-up in this matchup?
No, we got Jim the Anvil Neidhart getting stunned over the top rope.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know what? I'll allow that. I'll allow that. That's fine.
This was more an angle than a match. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but it was. I love Owen doing the, like, you know, choking. Although there was a lot of choking. There's a lot of choking on this show. Owen choking Steve Austin.
And Liv Morgan gets excited.
I bet she does. I bet she does. Chokes Steve Austin with the cable, and he goes, "Go ahead, disqualify me." After Owen tried to, like, get counted out. So, like, Owen just trying to save his title and doing that. And that's the kind of stuff that I always liked about Owen, is he was very good at doing that kind of thing.
I suppose.
And, but this was a pretty quick one. Again, the fact that they did this whole thing with the Intercontinental title shows that they knew what they had in Stone Cold Steve Austin. They knew what the formula was going to be going forward. That is right. Very
Austin
obvious.
316, that happened a year ago. They knew that Austin was going to be the world champion. They just needed the right framing device for what they were going to do with Austin.
Stunner party.
Stunner party.
And that's what it was. And Austin did his thing, and everybody cheered, and that was... And Steve Austin got more and more over by the day.
Austin is one of those people who gets over not because of his wrestling matches, but just because of who he is.
Yes. And Austin's promo earlier in the night was obviously great. You know, worried about the neck. You know, because, well, I mean, it's Austin. You know, he's still saying, like, am I nervous? Hell yeah, I'm nervous. You know, but I'm trying to win this motherfucker, so fuck out of my way.
It wasn't even a promo. It was just Austin talking.
Yeah. And it was great.
He exudes so much charisma, you could have him read the phone bill.
Yes, because Austin speaking is great. But then we get a very weird promo for kayfabe. It's like, this isn't real. I've broken every bone of my body. I once pooped in a barrel, and the barrel shattered, and all the pieces went up my rectum in the middle of a match. And this isn't real? Go fuck yourself. And I thought...
Wasn't this after Vincent Man already broke kayfabe?
Well, this is 97. This is long after people had known. Curtain calls already happened. The kayfabe's broken for, you know, the steroid trial and its entertainment and all that jazz. You know, they had the click cam, you know, Shawn and Bret. They basically were talking about, like, well, everybody knows the story. Everybody knows what's going on. There were discussions about how this was going to be the last night. And then all of the reality started getting injected into this last bit. Which is why I thought it was really, really ironic that right before this started, they had a promo for kayfabe. Going, you think this isn't real? And then they show you the realest shit you are going to see all night and maybe ever in the history of pro wrestling.
Yep. I will say this, though. It's a little bit kind of weird seeing Triple H and Shawn Michaels so young.
Well, yeah, considering what they look like now. But, yeah, I grew up watching that, man. I mean, that was their deal.
Yep, and also Hunter's ponytail is so stupid.
Well, it was. I mean, it wasn't as bad as it was when he was Jean-Paul Levesque in, like, 92 or Terror Rising in 94. You know, he had at least upgraded a little bit from that, but...
Not much of an upgrade.
Well, it would get better. It would definitely get better for Triple H. But in any case, of course, what we were talking about is the match that nobody ever talks about in the history of wrestling ever. It is Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship in Montreal when the thought that Bret might leave to go to WCW after this match. And Shawn Michaels in this match in the promo called Bret a mark man, and there was some interplay there.
You can tell a lot of Tony Khan's ideas came from shows like this one.
Yeah. And it was a really interesting way that they set this up with, like, Bret and Shawn, them having the backstage where the commentary was just laying out, and they just had Shawn walk out, and they came in from the back, like, through Gorilla, and then they saw him there. And then they mentioned Shawn, and then they did the same with Bret.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels disrespecting the Canadian flag, because of course he does.
Yeah, I mean, Shawn comes down, and now, in the context of knowing that this was about to be the screw job, I was really looking at what the expressions were on all these people's faces. Shawn looks relaxed. And that tells me that he knows that he's getting his way, and he is not worried about the circumstances at hand that everybody's been fussing about.
Yep. And we're going to say right now, yes, we see the sign.
Yes. And the signs, multiple. There were like 5 of them. And
especially that one with DX, all of them naked.
Yeah. It was Montreal. You could kind of understand why WWE didn't go back there for so long.
Yep. And Bret, when he's doing his walkout, you can see how nervous he is.
He looked so uneasy, like he knew something was up. He knew. I knew he knew. He knew something was up. And you know, it was just, Shawn looked pilled up. He looked relaxed. And and even JR said it's the 2 biggest egos in all of wrestling.
Yep, he's not wrong.
He is not wrong. What did you think? It was
just a matter, really.
Go, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was really just a matter of when with this match. When was it going to happen?
Yeah. So what did you think about the first part of this match that wasn't the match, but it was just brawling all around everywhere for a while?
I mean, jump start on the floor.
Yeah, it sure. Well, no, it was a jump start in the ring, and then the ref just didn't start the bell. Like, Hebner just didn't start, and then they roll to the outside, and then they just go have their old hootenanny, where Pat Patterson gets a random HBK pot shot, and so does a referee from Bret.
To be honest, really, it's just a lot of, again, the whole thing of Tony Khan took ideas from WWF without considering the talent that were involved.
Yeah.
You can get away with this kind of stuff with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. You can't get away with it with Chris Jericho and Schlub number 3.
You can't get away with it with Jon Moxley every single motherfucking week. You know, but in any case, it's not even that. This crowd, I will say though, it was way ballsier going out into the crowd then than it is now. Everyone now is docile.
Careful, especially for Shawn, because he legitimately could have been stabbed.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people who really did not like Shawn Michaels and really did love Bret. And, you know, King and JR were kind of letting folks in on, like, what they may not know, but not giving them all the details. But then, referees, dickless as always, did absolutely bumfuck of nothing to actually stop these two just fighting each other and then hitting referees. Nobody cares. And
I think it was just like, you know what? Let's just let them get their energy out, and then we can worry about the match.
Well, this was all part of the match, apparently. And then this is where I was like, all right, fuck this show. And that's something. When I'm like, okay, fuck this show. Somebody throws Bret the Quebec flag. And he rolls into the ring. Shawn Michaels is in the ring. Earl Hebner rings the bell. It starts, and the very first thing that happens is an illegal weapon of a flag being used to choke Shawn Michaels. How would that not be a fucking fuck this show? If this angle, this is where I'm like, if this angle and this real double cross didn't happen on this show, I would have shut this show off. Historically significant, yes. But good, no.
Yeah, there was just a lot of things here that were just, if you were thinking about it like a logical person, you wouldn't be doing these things. Like, they were doing suplexes on the outside. They're fighting with each other all around. They're choking each other with the U.S. flag and the Quebec flag and the Canadian flag and wires. It's just...
Bret did an inverted atomic drop and Shawn sold like he did for Hulk Hogan in 05.
Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah, and then they go outside for a massive amount of time. And Shawn had half of a Canadian flag, and he just used it to hit Bret. There's no way Hebner's disqualifying these two. They're like, well, fuck it. Fuck the refs. You're not going to do shit. And everyone's like, well, I will later. And... But...
Is it me with the show, or did it just feel like the match here was not important? I don't know how to describe it.
No, it really wasn't. And it just... The fans were into it, but I feel like even the fans could tell something was going on.
It felt like these two were really getting their aggression out with each other because, again, they hated each other in real life.
Yeah. But they were still working. You know, they weren't hurting each other. They were still working fine. You know, but you could still...
I mean, they were stiff as hell.
But, you know, I will have to say, you could tell... You could feel the tension throughout this match, and it adds just so much more to it. You know, Bret's starting to work on the leg. He just punches Shawn's knee. And, you know, I do like Shawn using a front face lock. I do like front face locks myself. I'm a sucker for them. And...
Yeah.
But still, you could count... I noticed this throughout this match. In WWF, you could count on a few staples with Bret Hart. You know, like the snap suplex, for instance. You know, there are certain moves that you could always do with Bret, but you never know where he's going to pepper them in. And that's really the magic of a Bret Hart match, is that he always varies where things go and why they're placed where they're placed.
Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels' comeback always happens at the exact same time, at the exact same place, in the exact same location.
Well, and then we get the ref bump. And
which one?
The first one.
Oh.
And then it happens. Would you like to tell the world what happens?
Well, I mean, there's a little bit more of like a setup thing. Like, there's the figure 4.
Yep. Under the ring post, first of all.
Yep. And then in the ring. And then the Russian leg sweep. Bret, he goes to the top rope and Shawn Michaels pulls Hebner in front of him, right?
Yep.
And then Shawn Michaels decides to go for the sharpshooter. And immediately you can hear Vince McMahon and Hebner saying, "Ring the bell, ring the bell."
And Hebner did it, and then the bell was rang. Hebner got the fuck out of Dodge. Bret was like, what the fuck just happened here?
Well, here's the thing. The shot that you see of Bret and he's looking at Vince, the second that the bell rang, Bret knew it.
Yep.
That's why when he spit at Vince's face...
Which they cut away from, because they still cannot come to terms with this, and they cut away from this matchup. They cut away from this very quickly.
Well, that's the thing, is that Vince told Shawn, get the belt and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Because there was legitimately, Shawn was going to get attacked by somebody. In fact, there were several times where fans tried to attack him.
I bet, yes, there were. And they just got a Dodge.
Garbage was being thrown, and they immediately cut off the show. With JR and Jerry Lawler having no idea what happened.
Yeah, they're like, what the fuck just happened here? This is going to be riddled with controversy. And, you know, they don't add the whole part where Bret just destroys the set and just like basically throws a massive tantrum and then goes back and punches Vince in the face. But that's been covered plenty by people more educated on the subject than us, even though apparently some wrestlers are hoodwinked into thinking it's still a work. And to me, Bret is too bitter for me to think it's a work.
No, it was never a work.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyone who thinks the work is an idiot.
Yeah, sorry. I do not believe that whatsoever. It's just... But unfortunately, I don't necessarily... Again, it's like one of those situations where I don't necessarily... There's arguments to be made for both sides. So, it is, it is what it is. But in a vacuum here, what do you feel about this match? Now, from start to finish and how it's built and like even the way that it is and of course the way that it is now looked at reverently and historically for its value in WWE's history. Do you think that this moment holds up?
The moment itself holds up because it's significant and important to what was going to happen to both WWF, WCW, and professional wrestling in general.
Yes.
The match itself does not.
No. Shawn and Bret had way better matches than that.
This didn't even feel like a match. It just felt like a very long angle.
Well, in a lot of ways it was, considering like the whole fighting around and just fucking around basically for more time than you actually spent wrestling. And they did go back in to wrestle, and it was... Here's the thing. This was a show that spat in Montreal's face.
Literally.
And that's why Bret hawked one back at Vince's face on behalf of Montreal. Considering what had happened in this show, how many countouts there were, just blah most of the rest of this show was, save for a couple highlights. Like, let's get to the ratings here. Do you have anything more to say about this match specifically?
I don't really have much to say about this match other than that this is, again, one of the most significant moments in the history of wrestling. And on the whole, I think any wrestling fan should go and see this match, but only really for the ending because there's not much else there.
Yeah. Yeah, really. It's one of those deals where one match show doesn't even really describe the show. So let's get to the show ratings and what you viewed out of 10. So let's start with you, Sky. Your overall view of the entire show, and what do you give this out of 10? Survivor Series 97.
It's hard to give a grade for this show because of the historical significance, it should receive a higher grade than what I'm going to give it. But the show itself just couldn't justify it. I don't think there was really any good matches on the show. There were good moments.
Yeah.
There were several good moments, but I can't say that there was a great match or a great promo. And I don't even necessarily say there's a good match in here. There's some solid matches. There are matches when I'm watching them, I'm like, okay, there's something there. But none of the matches were complete. None of the angles were gripping, except the last one, obviously. This show felt like it wouldn't be remembered except for that moment. And if the moment had not happened, there'd be nothing about the show. No one would care about the show. And it's ironic, given the man that the show is going to be after, but it has to be done. It's a 4 out of 10. Bret Hart certified.
That's good. That's good. I wish I'd have thought of that, actually.
I mean, you could still do it.
Well, it's funny because I say I wish I'd have thought of that because I did. I gave it the same grade, and I'm going to explain basically the same way that you did. It's very... because you did it so well. This show was a whole lot of mid. And the fact of the matter is, this gimmick itself only works when either you've got the right people invested in these matches or the kinds of matches there are, or you've got one really main match that you're trying to build the show around, and then you've got some other things that could be added in. Although I'm still a fan of just doing one big gimmick match show. That's just my 2 cents put into it. Or if you're going to do gimmick matches, you're doing ones that are, you know, very uniquely different from each other. That being said, nothing on this show, and I'm not even looking for necessarily match quality per se. You know, I'm not looking for in-ring technique and holds and grips and all that shit. That's not the point. It's just that when you look at all of these in a vacuum, you could see what the real major underlying problems were in the WWF in the 90s and why. Nash's run with the underlying 95 didn't really work. Shawn's run in 96 didn't really work. And Bret's run in 97 was starting to build traction, but it really was much more on the back of what Stone Cold Steve Austin was growing to be and what Rocky was about to become, that people didn't even realize was going to become as astronomically as he did. It's just, it seems like this as a turning point for what was going to change as far as both of those men, both Bret and Shawn, being out of the company in the next 4 months, or 4 or 5 months in WWE, and what it would turn into with Steve Austin and The Rock and still Undertaker being there and Triple H turning into what he turned into and all of that jazz. Nothing on this shows right now that they had no tag division that was going to eventually be the Hardys and the Dudleys and Edge and Christian and all of those people who, you know, and the Acolytes, JBL and Farouk, you know, and
the Outlaws
and Too Cool and all of those people who were going to eventually get into this, you know, put themselves into the fold and really establish themselves as tag teams to watch. This, we have the Disciples of Apocalypse. You know, we have DOA, and it's just, it doesn't hit, and you could tell what the problems are. It's a lot of the gimmicks we're not hitting because it's the same kind of stuff that we've been dealing with modern day WWE in a lot of ways. You know, for every DOA, we have the social outcasts.
Ooh.
Yeah. Or, you know, it's or the League of Nations. Another gold, you know, and that's the thing. You could see where the inherent problems are, but you would also see where the inherent fixes were developing. And that's the thing about this show. It's very unique in that you could see that Steve Austin was heading meteorically up the card. You could see The Rock was developing into maybe one of the most over talent that WWE were ever going to have. And you could see that something needed to change in Shawn and Bret, and you got to see what Vince was eventually going to be in that night thereafter. But if I'm going to say right now, would I recommend Survivor Series 97 to a friend to get them into wrestling? My answer is hell no. Because this doesn't show really that much of what I like about wrestling. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me, a Bret Hart 4 out of 10, because the only thing that hurts me about this show really significantly is the fact that Bret really was never the same spiritually after this happened. And that's a shame.
You could tell afterwards that a lot of the fire that Bret Hart had was taken out of him. And you don't blame him, because this really was one of the most humiliating things to him. His pride as a Canadian and also as a professional wrestler was taken over and just abused by Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon has done a lot of things to a lot of people, but one of the most dastardly was what he did to Bret Hart that night in Montreal, almost 25 years ago.
But at the same time, it was not right thereafter of Bret to go on to all of the news sites and stations and go, I was screwed, it's all predetermined, I was supposed to win, and Vince screwed me, and he started going up to the media and saying all of that stuff, whether it was true or not. To do that and blatantly go out and break kayfabe and go in and say that stuff, that was irresponsible of Bret, and there was no reason to do it other than being hurt and speaking out of hurt. And Bret ought to have had more respect for the business than to do that.
But again, Bret Hart felt betrayed by Vince McMahon, who went back on his word.
Which I understand. I completely get that. But think about the family that he's a part of. You know? Think about the family he's a part of and how what the respect for wrestling was that was instilled into them. Things that I don't even know. I would never have experienced. Unspeakable things in the dungeon that I would never have even dreamt of in order to keep kayfabe alive and respect the business. The guy who really did that and stood up for that. And then he gets double-crossed. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it was a shit situation. But to fuck the business up over like that was irresponsible of Bret.
But then at the same time, it was also a thing of, is it a work or is it a shoot? Is he actually legitimately pissed at Vince McMahon, or is it something that he's working as a storyline saying, screw WWF, I'm going to go to WCW and make WCW the show to watch with me, the hitman, at the center of it. It goes both ways, and it's difficult to tell. It's just, again, 25 years ago, a lot of emotion at that time.
Yeah, and that's really the interesting thing in the bottom line. It's a lot of emotion, and you can tell a lot of emotion. You can tell that the Attitude Era really was properly begun on this night. So historically, very significant, but the quality of show surrounding it was not good. But you know what is good, Sky, is our content.
Yep.
And we
yes,
have more of it coming your way. Now, Skylar, I know that we have... Remind me real quick what day Survivor Series is.
So it's going to be in about, 3 weeks?
I believe so.
It'll be November 26th.
November 26th. So, on the 16th of November, I'm going to AEW Dynamite for the go-home show with MJF. And I want to see... he better be on the show. If he's not on the show, I'm going to be fucking rip shit mad. But...
What, you don't want to watch the Jon Moxley promo?
I don't care about literally anything else but MJF. MJF or bust, baby. Although, if I get an acclaimed rap, I'll be happy about that too.
You can yell at the Acclaim, say that the raps on NWO are better, and only one person's going to know about it.
What that means is that on the following week, which would be that Monday, I believe that would be the 21st. That Monday the 21st, Abizzle was going to rejoin the show because he's coming with me, and we're going to do a review of the show, of the Go Home Dynamite. And Sky, if you can, I would like for you to watch this Dynamite.
Oh, do I have to?
Yes. I want you to watch the Dynamite we see live, and I want you to see if you can see us if we're in a decent spot. You probably won't, but I still want you to look.
I don't want to watch Dynamite.
Skylar, put your big boy pants on. Put your host pants on. And
but they're going to do flips.
Yeah, well, hey, if I'm going to watch flips live, you got to watch flips too.
Did you pay for your tickets?
I'm about to. It's happening. The point is, it's happening, Sky. It's happening. So, November 21st, Skylar's going to watch this Dynamite, and we are going to be at this Dynamite, and we are going to give that review. And then the week after that, we're going to do this, which means next week...
It has to be NWL versus ACPW.
It has to be NWL and ACPW. Now, I know that's weird, because we already did one. Technically, it was November 2nd when ACPW and NWL showed up, but that means next week is ACPW and NWL.
Because I think what it is that we need to show both WWE and AEW how to book. Because again, This show reminds me that Vince McMahon's booking sucks.
That's
and I
right.
need Triple H to improve his show.
And before anyone asks, I'm going to the Dynamite. I do not care about Full Gear. Unless something on Dynamite has me so goddamn interested that I want to watch Full Gear, I don't think it's happening. I have way better things to do than to waste 5 hours reviewing that shit.
Double review Survivor Series 2022 at Full Gear.
Good God. Good God. It would literally be a marathon. It would be
Full Gear is on the
marathon.
19th.
Yeah, that would have to be a special so large that you would have to store it in Chris Jericho's former fat. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what you have to look forward to next week is ACPW and NWL. It is Wrestle Festival, baby. Wrestle Festival. Let's go. And the go home show for Winter Warfare in ACPW. Exciting times. Thrilling adventures. Skylar, thank you very much for watching this historically significant Survivor Series show.
Thank you for having me. I feel like, again, we have to watch this because this is an important show to the history of wrestling, and I'm glad to explore it.
Me too. Me too. I'm glad we got the chance to dibble-dabble in this drabble. And until then, I hope you don't get buried by gravel. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week right after this short commercial break right now. Okay, now.